I found out my fiancé was cheating on me from a photograph sent by someone who never even signed their name. Just a single image, dropped into my messages like a stone into still water. And in 1 second, 3 years of my life cracked straight down the middle. The photograph itself was almost insultingly ordinary. Not a grainy paparazzi shot, not some scandalous angle sold to a tabloid. Just a woman's hand, Linda Potts's hand, I would learn later resting on Joshua's chest in a restaurant booth I recognized instantly, because he'd taken me there for our 2nd anniversary. Whoever sent it didn't add a caption. They didn't need one. I sat with it open on my phone for 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire time, like if I kept my eyes on something steady, the room would stop tilting. Then I closed the app, put on my coat, and drove to his apartment. He opened the door already smiling, the way he always did, like my presence was a review he was confident would come back 5 stars. The smile didn't last. He saw my face and understood, in that fast, calculating way of his, exactly which version of the conversation he needed to have. "Iris, baby, whatever you think you saw." "I don't think anything, I know." "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like." He ran a hand through his hair, and I watched him search for the angle, the way he searched for angles in board meetings when a number didn't favor him. Okay, it happened. Once, twice. It didn't mean anything, it was stress, the merger, you were always working. Was I working when you took her to a Vernox? Or did you just have the night free? That landed. I saw it land. And then, instead of the crumbling I might have expected from a man caught, I watched something else cross his face, irritation. At me, for knowing. "You're going to blow this out of proportion," he said. "You always do this, make everything a production." There it was, 3 sentences into being caught, and somehow I was already the problem, dramatic, difficult, humiliating him by simply having found out. "You slept with someone else," I said slowly, giving him the chance to hear it out loud. "And the part you're worried about is that I might make it a production." "That's not what I—" "Do you regret it?" He hesitated, not the hesitation of a man searching his conscience, the hesitation of a man calculating which answer would work. "I regret that you're upset," he said finally. I actually laughed. One short, disbelieving breath of a laugh, and something in my chest that had been white-knuckling itself together for 4 minutes simply let go. "I'm not upset, Joshua. I'm finished." "Don't be ridiculous. We're getting married. You love me." "I do," I said, and watched relief flood his face before I finished the sentence. "That's not going to save you." I took the ring off. It came off easier than I expected, no catching on the knuckle, no small resistance from 3 years of wearing it. It simply slid free, like it had been waiting for permission. I set it on the table by his door. Not thrown, not dramatic, placed the way you'd set down something that no longer belonged to you. "Iris." "You should call Linda," I said. "I imagine she'd like to know she's not a secret anymore." I walked out while he was still finding the next thing to say. I didn't look back to see his face, but I didn't need to. I already knew what I'd see there, not grief, disbelief. The particular disbelief of a man who has never once in his entire life been told no and meant it. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time before I turned the key. I did not cry. I kept waiting to, the way you wait for a storm you can see coming, and it never arrived, just a strange, cold stillness, like the moment after you've set down something impossibly heavy. I thought, he still thinks I'm coming back. I thought, he has no idea. By Monday, the story had a different author. "Iris is having a hard time," I heard, secondhand, from 3 separate people. "Pre-wedding stress. She'll come around, they always do." Joshua's mother called my office twice before noon, her voice honeyed with the particular concern people perform when what they actually want is compliance. "Sweetheart, I know you're hurt, but you can't let one mistake." 2 restaurants and 8 months isn't a mistake, Margaret. It's a relationship. Silence. She hadn't known I knew that much. I let it sit there. "Joshua's devastated," she tried instead. "Is he? He seemed mostly annoyed when I found out. Flowers arrived that afternoon, an obscene, gallery-worthy arrangement that had clearly cost more than most people's monthly rent, with a card that read, "You know this isn't really over." Jay, not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong." A statement about what I supposedly knew, as though my own certainty could be overwritten by his. I had them sent to the hospital wing our foundation funded. Someone there would enjoy them more than I would. He showed up at my office on Wednesday. My assistant buzzed me, apologetic, and I told her to send him in, not because I wanted to see him, but because I wanted him to see me. Unshaken, unmoved. Not the wreckage he'd been promised by everyone whispering in his ear that I'd come apart eventually. "You blocked my calls," he said without hello. I did. "Iris, this is insane. We have a wedding. 200 people. My family flew caterers in from." "Cancel it. You're punishing me." "I'm leaving you. There's a difference, though I understand why you'd confuse the two. You've never actually experienced consequences before." Something flickered behind his eyes, quick and mean, gone before it fully surfaced. "You still love me. Everyone knows it. You don't throw away 3 years over one mistake if you don't still." "I do still love you," I said, and I watched the same relief try to bloom on his face that had bloomed in his apartment before I ended it. "So." He blinked. So that means something." "It means I loved you. Past and present tense, same sentence, both true. It doesn't mean I owe you anything for it. It doesn't mean I have to stay to prove it was real." "You're being cruel." "I'm just done, Joshua. There's a difference there, too." He tried 3 more angles before he left: guilt, then charm, then, when neither worked, a low, cold threat about what a public breakup might do to the Foundation's donor relationships, as though my life's work was a hostage he could hold. I let him finish. I didn't raise my voice. "Try it," I said. "See what happens to your name once people learn why." He left without another word. For the first time since the photograph, I noticed my hands weren't shaking. That night, I turned my phone off entirely. Not to block one more call, but because I realized, somewhere around hour 6 of narcissistic mothers and cheating fiancés and expensive apology flowers, that I didn't need to hear from any of them to know I'd already made the right choice. I slept better than I had in months. Grief, I discovered, doesn't always look like grief. Sometimes it looks like reorganizing your entire kitchen at 11 at night because you can't sleep, and your hands need somewhere to put the leftover adrenaline. Sometimes it looks like deleting a restaurant from your saved places. Then, a week later, deleting 3 more, because you realize half your favorite spots in the city are only favorites because he chose them. I threw myself into the foundation. We broke ground on the literacy center I'd been fighting the board over for a year. I took meetings I used to delegate. I said yes to things I would have once said, "Let me check my calendar," to, because for the first time in 3 years, my calendar belonged only to me. Word moved through our circle the way it always does, quietly, then all at once. Linda Potts, it turned out, was not the first, just the first I'd found proof of. Someone at a fundraiser mentioned an assistant from 2 years back who'd left the company abruptly. Someone else mentioned a business trip to Chicago that hadn't matched the itinerary Joshua gave his own brother. I felt strangely little hearing it. Not vindication, exactly. More like watching a building you already knew was condemned finally show its cracks to everyone else. Joshua's calls to mutual friends became more frequent, more strategic. "Have you talked to her? Does she seem okay? Tell her I'm not giving up." People started mentioning it to me not as gossip, but as concern, the way you'd flag something faintly worrying. He wasn't grieving a relationship. He was managing a narrative, working the room the way he worked every room, except this time the room wasn't buying it because I wasn't playing my part. Linda, I heard, had been quietly phased out, not because he'd learned anything, because she'd served her purpose and stopped being useful once I stopped reacting. I noticed, with the strange clarity of distance, how small he seemed now. Not smaller than he'd been, the same size he'd always been. I simply wasn't standing close enough anymore to mistake his volume for substance. My best friend, Dana, took me to dinner one night, somewhere new, somewhere that had never belonged to anyone but me, and asked, gently, if I was okay. "I'm going to be," I told her, and meant it for the first time. "I keep waiting to fall apart. I don't think it's coming." "Maybe," she said. "You already did the falling apart part back when you found out. Maybe what's happening now is just you standing back up." I thought about that for a long time after she said it. It felt true in a way I didn't have better words for yet. The gala was for the Literacy Center, our first public event since groundbreaking, and I almost didn't go. 6 weeks of being watched, assessed, whispered about had left me with a specific fatigue for rooms full of people holding champagne and opinions about my life. I went anyway, because it was my project, my work, the thing that was mine and only mine, and I wasn't going to let Joshua's shadow keep me out of it. I met Kaiden Morris by the dessert table, of all places, both of us reaching for the same slice of lemon tart at the same moment. "It's yours," he said, stepping back. "I'll take the moral high ground and the chocolate one instead." "That's a terrible trade. The chocolate one's from a box mix. I watch the caterers." He laughed, really laughed, not the practiced half-laugh people perform at events like this, and set the chocolate slice down like it had personally betrayed him. "Well, now I just feel foolish." We ended up talking for 40 minutes, then an hour, migrating without discussing it to a quieter corner near the windows. He asked about the Literacy Center, not the polite, glazing over kind of asking, but real questions, the kind that meant he was actually listening to the answers. He knew who I was, obviously. Everyone in that room did, but he never once brought up Joshua, never fished for the story, never gave me that particular look people had been giving me for 6 weeks, equal parts pity and curiosity. "You run Morris Aerospace's foundation," I said. "I looked you up, don't look so alarmed." "I'd be more alarmed if you hadn't," he said. "Seems only fair. I looked you up the second you walked in." And I decided the tart was a much better excuse to talk to you than anything I could have come up with about grant matching. I felt something unfamiliar flicker in my chest, not the electric urgency I remembered from young love, not the anxious performance of trying to be enough. Something quieter, easier, like exhaling after holding my breath for 6 weeks without realizing it. "I should go mingle," I said eventually, though I didn't want to. "Donor obligations." Understood completely. He handed me his card, plain, unhurried. "No pressure of any kind, but if you ever want to talk about anything that isn't a gala or grant matching or lemon tart, I'd like that." I put the card in my clutch, and for the rest of the night, found myself smiling at nothing in particular. It had been a long time since I'd done that. Kaiden and I started slow, the way you'd approach something you were afraid of dropping. Coffee first, then dinner at a place he chose because he'd remembered from one offhand comment weeks earlier that I liked restaurants with open kitchens, liked watching the choreography of people who were good at their work. He noticed things. He asked before he assumed. When I mentioned once that I hated being interrupted mid-thought, he never did it again, not performed carefulness, just quiet, consistent attention that never announced itself. He showed up to the Literacy Center's second fundraiser, not as my date, but as a donor who cared about the actual work, and stood in the back clapping loudest when I gave my remarks, and never once tried to make the evening about him. "You don't have to keep proving anything," I told him one night, maybe a month in, as we sat on his balcony with 2 glasses of wine going warm between us. "I already like you. You can stop being perfect." "I'm not being perfect," he said. "Is that what it felt like before?" I hadn't told him much about Joshua. He'd never asked directly, only left the door open if I wanted to walk through it. That night, for the first time, I did. "It felt like being managed," I said slowly, finding the words as I spoke them. Like love was something I had to keep earning back. Like there was always a bill coming due, and I never knew the amount until I'd already failed to pay it. Kaiden didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "That's not what this is." "I know," I said, and I did. That was the strange, disorienting gift of it. I knew, in my body, the way you know a room is warm the second you walk into it, without needing to check a thermostat. Joshua found out about us 2 weeks later, at a charity auction we both happened to attend. I saw him clock Kaiden's hand at the small of my back, saw him watch the way Kaiden leaned down to laugh at something I said. Easy, unbothered, nothing to prove. He cornered me near the coat check. That's who you left me for. I didn't leave you for anyone, Joshua. I left you for me. He's going to get bored. Guys like that always do. Maybe, I said. But I'll tell you what he hasn't done once in 2 months, made me feel like I owed him something for being loved. Something in his face cracked, just slightly, at that. Not remorse. I don't think Joshua was capable of that particular emotion, but something closer to the first real fear he'd felt through this whole ordeal. The fear of a man realizing his greatest asset, my devotion, was no longer his to spend. You'll regret this, he said weakly, like even he didn't believe it anymore. I don't think I will, I said, and I walked back to where Kaiden was waiting, arm already open, no questions, no interrogation about who that had been. Just steady, warm presence exactly where I'd left him. Joshua's last attempt came 3 months later, and by then, it had lost even the sheen of charm. He showed up outside my building unannounced, and when I opened the door, whatever composure he'd built his whole identity on had thinned to something brittle and mean. You've made your point, he said. Everyone knows how strong you are for leaving me. Congratulations. Can we be done with the performance now? There's no performance, Joshua. I'm just living. You're punishing me for something that happened months ago. I'm not punishing you. I'm not thinking about you enough to punish you. That might be the part that actually bothers you. He laughed, sharp and humorless. You'll never find someone who loves you the way I did. You're right, I said, and watched him startle at the agreement. I won't, because Kaiden doesn't love me the way you did. He loves me without keeping score. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I simply closed it gently, the way you close a chapter you've already finished reading, and I felt no ache follow me back up the stairs. Just quiet, just peace. That weekend, Kaiden took me to the coast. No occasion, no anniversary, just a Saturday he decided we should spend somewhere with more sky than city. We walked the shoreline until the sun dropped low and orange, and he pulled something small from his jacket pocket. Not a ring, not a proposal, just a single smooth stone he'd picked up earlier in the day. I'm not trying to rush anything, he said, pressing it into my palm. I just want you to have something today that isn't attached to any expectation, no box to check, no answer required. I just saw it and thought of you and wanted you to have it. I turned it over in my hand, warm from his pocket, unremarkable, ordinary, in the way the photograph months ago had been ordinary. But this time ordinary didn't ache. This time it simply felt like being chosen, quietly, without conditions, by someone who understood that love didn't need a bill attached to be real. Thank you, I said, and meant it more than he probably understood. I used to think love was the finish line, that if you loved someone enough, hard enough, honestly enough, it would be sufficient to keep you. I know better now. Love was never the problem with Joshua. I loved him completely, and it still wasn't enough to make me stay, because love was never meant to be the price of my own dignity. Walking away from him wasn't the absence of love. It was proof I understood what love was supposed to feel like, and the courage, finally, to stop accepting anything less. Thank you so much for listening to Dusklit Audio. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the story. Leave a heart or thumbs up in the comments if you want more.